Welcome back to DTD. We're not going to waste a whole lot of time with the intro. We don't have a whole lot to talk about, but we do have a lot to talk about in one sport, that is NASCAR, if you've been keeping up, and it's hard not to at this point. We had a very, very exciting, interesting weekend in NASCAR. I mean, this season's been incredible. It's been the best season I can remember in a long time. Just really exciting stuff all throughout the year, and we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs. You can feel the pressure building, and none other than Austin Dillion felt the pressure the most maybe out of any driver. I mean, he's been yelled at. He's been on a hot seat for probably 10 years at this point. RCR made some changes in the Olympic break, and he delivered. He looked good. Questionable about the win or not, but the race itself, he looked good, and he performed well. So I guess we'll just get right into it. We'll rate his burnout, and then we'll talk about whether or not we'll talk about everything that goes down. I gave it a 10. I mean, after what he did to win and just the sheer excitement you could feel to the burnout, it's a 10.
I'm giving it a 9 purely because he immediately got his baby as soon as possible to where he was immune to getting beat up. But that's the only really detractor for me. The rest of it was great. I'm giving it a 9 with 1 point deduction for, I think, being scared of getting beat up by Denny Hamlin or Joey Logano.
The baby wouldn't stop me, just saying. I would have grabbed the baby, gave it back to the wife, and just went to town. The babies don't stop me. But yeah, so let's just talk about it. So it looked like the race was coming to an end, and then all of a sudden, Ricky Stenhouse has a Ricky Stenhouse moment. Caution comes out. So now we have a green-white checkered. Austin Dillion is on the front row in the green-white checker, right? Has a terrible restart, not a good restart, and it pretty much sold the bag. I was like, oh, Joey Logano is going to win another short race this year.
Yeah.
Lap 1 happens, lap 2 happens. Joey Logano's got a pretty good gap at this point. It's a gap where I was thinking, if Austin Dillion is to make a move on Joey Logano, it's going to be a huge move. And what do you know? It was a huge move. He was probably a car and a half length behind, 1.5 car lengths behind Joey Logano going into turn 3. Decided not to use the brake and use Joey Logano as his brake, and gets into the rear bumper, sends Logano up the track. But this also slows Austin Dillion down. It wasn't like a typical bump and run. He's got the win. Austin Dillion still has to fight for the win. So now you have Denny Hamlin off turn 4. Looks like Denny Hamlin's your winner. Well, they kind of it's still up in the air whether Austin Dillion really turned into Denny Hamlin or if they're kind of just going to collide at some point. Obviously, if they were more nose to nose, they'd collide and have one of those classic NASCAR bumping drag races to the finish. However, Austin Dillion was at the point where when he gets into Denny Hamlin, he hooks him in the right quarter panel, right rear, and sends Denny Hamlin into the wall. Caution comes out. Austin Dillion's your winner. Now, what is your thoughts on both incidents?
Okay, so the one with Joey Logano is, I wouldn't say it's too far because at the end of the day, this is NASCAR, and I think NASCAR has made it very clear that wrecking someone for the win is absolutely okay. And I think it doesn't matter the degree of how far you come back from to wreck the guy. Because at the end of the day, if you go in with the intent to wreck the guy, even if you're 2 inches behind him going into the corner, you still wreck the guy to win. And I think that since NASCAR has shown leniency in that, I personally don't think that's deserving of a penalty at all, even though it looks a lot worse because it isn't to Joey Logano. I will say, I think the fan base reaction would be a lot more one-sided if he did that to, say, Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson instead of Joey Logano. But I think the Denny Hamlin one is where it gets weird for me because initially you watch those two cars meet and you go, well, I guess Denny Hamlin's taking the racing line. Austin Dillon's trying to avoid Joey Logano. But SMT data was released today, and it looks like Dillon hangs a left on the SMT data to go chase that 11's quarter panel. And then you can also hear Austin Dillon's spotter yelling, wreck him about the 11 after he's already turned the 22. So with how NASCAR has officiated right rear hooking a guy in the past, I think that has to be a penalty personally. But also, I don't think you vacate the win because NASCAR has no precedent to vacate a win before other than cars failing inspection, the 3-pass inspection. What I think, if I were making the penalties here, my penalty for Austin Dillion is, okay, congrats, you're in the playoffs, but you do not get the playoff points for that win. You go into the playoffs on 0 playoff points. You don't get the 5 for that win, and we'll just see how long you can survive. And I think also you suspend the spotter. You suspend the spotter for a couple races for encouraging your driver to wreck somebody, especially a right rear hook. I think that would be an appropriate penalty. And I do want to say, I think all of this it's really unfortunate because I was texting you up until the point where all that happened on that green white checker to the overtime. Now, I was like, goodness, green white checker 2017. But I still think that race was the best race of Austin Dillon's Cup career, in my opinion. He finally had good equipment. He took full advantage of it. He was actually setting up moves well on Hamlin and Logano through most of the end of that race until the overtime period. And I do think it's kind of funny that the guy that ruined his race was his former Nationwide Series arch nemesis and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So like 90 chess from Stenhouse there. But I think it's really unfortunate the way this ended, because otherwise this would have been like the feel-good story of the year. Austin Dillon, RCR bringing a fast car for once, Austin Dillon taking advantage of it, and instead it's wrapped up in all this controversy. It all kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because Joey Logano's comment on the radio, I think, is very apt to what a lot of fans, including myself, are feeling after this. Is this racing or is this wrestling? Like, at what point do we... Yeah. Because I don't think you can say that's too far, because NASCAR's allowed wrecking for the win before, but at what point are we going to make a line to where it's no longer legal to just wreck a guy for the win? That's what I think holds it back on a world stage of motorsports, is it's the only racing series where you're allowed to just junk a guy.
Right, and that's kind of sparked, I think the most interesting thing to happen from this is it sparked the conversation of a line. Denny Hamlin said it immediately in his post-race interview. Was a line crossed? There's an invisible line. Line. It's all been, okay, well, what's too far? This has been in the sport since the history of the sport. Dale Sr. was notorious for this. I mean, Austin Dillon pretty much did what Dale Sr. did back in the 90s and whatever.
I would argue that's slightly different, because Dale Sr. would never been 32nd in points.
That is true. But then again, if you're 32nd in points and you're up there for a win, does that make it more justifiable or less justifiable? Because you're that desperate.
It more justifiable. And people are talking about, well, guys that aren't locked in the playoffs right now didn't wreck people. Chris Buescher didn't wreck Larson at Kansas. Martin Truex didn't wreck Kyle Larson at Sonoma. That's completely different.
Three races to go.
3 races to go. Austin Dillon knows for a fact he is out based on points unless he can win a race.
Must win.
And if you're RCR, you're not expecting a winning car at Michigan for sure. Maybe you can say Daytona. I guarantee you're not expecting a winning car at Darlington. So you kind of have to do whatever you can in that moment to make the playoffs. And especially for a guy that hasn't won in pretty much 2 years, a year and a half for Austin Dillon, the format kind of encourages that. And we can go on a whole nother tangent about why the format's not great and why the current playoff system isn't great for NASCAR as well. But I think it's just... a lot of decisions by NASCAR have kind of, I think, ushered us to this moment where we are right now. And if you're NASCAR, you're kind of in a bind here, because on the one hand, you can't penalize this too badly because you've set a precedent of it's okay to wreck guys for the win. But on the other hand, you have to penalize because you've also set a precedent of right-rearing guys, and both of those things happened at once. So it's like, what do you do?
My stance is just leave the Joey Logano incident out of it. If you're going to penalize them, have it be for the right rear hooking, not something super major. But then again, I mean, you've suspended Chase Elliott and other drivers for that same exact thing. Now, obviously, when Chase Elliott did it to Denny Hamlin, they're at higher speeds. It was more deliberate. It was more dangerous. He hit the wall head on. You could argue.
You can't make this adjustable for speed of the car. That's a whole new element that's going to be ridiculous to try to officiate.
So there's a chance that if they suspend Austin Dillon, and then maybe that makes him ineligible for the playoffs, depending on how they rule that. But
yeah, I doubt you get a waiver in that case.
Right. So it sets a weird kind of bad taste in people's mouths. Like, okay, you suspended so many guys for right rear hooking, and then you're not going to do it to Austin Dillon, who we know is not going to advance in the playoffs probably, unless this RCR changes is really freaking good, which I don't think it is. But leave the Joe Logano stuff out of it. I do think the spotter, after hearing the radio, I do think he needs to get the harshest penalty, maybe like a 5-race suspension and like a $35,000 fine, $50,000 fine, whatever. But it's just it's hard to judge, and I don't think they're going to do anything. I mean, it's 8 o'clock the next night, and we haven't had an issue. Now, NASCAR is notoriously slow, and and things like this.
Well,
But
I will say, Elliot Sawyer did say when they interviewed him after the race, they said expect news on Tuesday as far as possible
okay,
penalties, if they're going to be penalties. And as we record
and
this on a Monday, we obviously don't know that yet. So
and one of his main things in his interview was we're going to listen. He stated, he said, we're going to
yeah,
listen to the spotters and see what the spotters had to say. After
and he said
saying that,
S&T data.
right, and after saying you're going to listen to the spotters and having that big of a wreck 'em, you've got to do something. So I would not be shocked if Austin Dillon is penalized, suspended 1 or 2 races, and ineligible for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think honestly, because I know a lot of people are calling for the win to be vacated and to knock him out of the playoffs that way. Well, I think NASCAR, like you're saying, has a very easy solution here. You suspend him for a race or two, and then, oh no, suddenly he's not eligible for the playoffs. Then basically you do the same thing as negating the win without actually negating the win. I still think I would feel bad for Austin Dillon if he got left out of the playoffs because of this, but because I think he did have the fastest car. Like I've said, I think he drove the best race of his Cup career in this race. Like I said, I think it's better to just remove the playoff points from this win. So he's basically a guaranteed first round knockout. And while a guaranteed first round knockout is not good for the playoffs, in my opinion, I don't think a lot of things about this playoff system are good. So if you're going to allow a guy in for just getting a win on the year. Also, let's talk about the fact that the whole 30th in points thing would be very handy right about now, seeing as he sits 31st in points after that win.
Right. I mean,
If we still had that, this would not be a problem at all.
Yeah, and before we get too far, this is my bad flip of the week, just because he's slaying 2 people in the last lap. So instead of bats flipping in the air, it's cars spinning through the air, thanks to the number 3. But this kind of shadowed the whole Richmond race as a whole. I mean, let's not forget that they had a new tire that they debuted at this race, and it worked. It was
Daniel
very
Suarez.
impressive. Right. I mean, his day was completely different because he was willing to try a different strategy than literally every other team. The option tire only works if you make it work. If you run it when everybody else runs it, you're just running the normal tire, which is what we saw with almost every team. They saved it for stage 3. First pit stop in stage 3, they ran it. Then they all went back to the prime tire. And then they all went back to the prime tire for the second pit stop. And then they ran it for green, white, checkered. I feel like we're going to see this evolve over time, especially after watching what Daniel Suarez did. But this tire is really going to shine when teams have different strategies. Let's say someone in the second, they use their first one when everybody uses it to keep up or whatever. And then they go to the prime tire. Well, then in that second pit stop, I mean, everyone was kind of betting on a green, white, checkered, or betting on a caution. If someone had just gone to the option tire on that last pit stop in stage 3 and we didn't get a caution, there's a good chance that driver wins.
Well, you saw a couple guys try that. I can't remember exactly who did that, but I know there were a couple. But you talk about guys going off sequence, and let's look at the guys that went off sequence here in the final finishing order. Guys that by the end of the race, when Daniel Suarez and Ryan Blaney put their option tires on for the last time to cut back through the field, the only guys who were off sequence with that usage of the option tire were Carson Hocevar, Daniel Suarez, and Ryan Blaney. And they finished 8th, 10th, and 11th. And I would argue that Hocevar did not have the speed for 8th. Blaney honestly probably had a 20th place car this weekend based on how that thing was running most of the race. And then I do want to talk about ECR engines as well here a bit, because we saw Austin Dillon have the speed to be the fastest car in this race, basically. And then also, both Trackhouse cars were good this weekend. I know Suarez benefited from the strategy, but Ross Chastain was a fringe top 5 car all day, finished 5th. Obviously, Kyle Busch didn't have the pace. I think that's more of a RCR giving the upgrades to grandbaby first than Kyle Busch type thing. I think you could maybe see Kyle Busch pick up if this is a consistent improvement, but I think something changed with those ECR engines over the Olympic break. I don't know quite what it is, but for Trackhouse to have had an off year as well, and then suddenly 3 of those 4 cars are running top 10 for most of the night, you can't convince me that the ECR engines have not improved at least somewhat over the break.
No, and the best example of that is your 2 worst guys in those cars, Austin Dillon and Daniel Suarez, running up front. Ross Chastain you could expect to run up front from week to week. Kyle Busch, I get he's had whatever stint he's had, but you can
And
expect
driving
him to
with
be
a
competitive.
still partially sprained wrist as well.
Right, and doing his best Ricky Bobby
Oh
impression,
my gosh, that was
cutting the
amazing.
cast off. I'm
RCR
shocked
cannot
NASCAR.
even make sharp scissors.
Dude, I'm shocked. I'm very shocked NASCAR let him drive a race car with scissors. You're not supposed to run with scissors. And they're like, you can go 200 miles an hour with those in the
Listen,
car.
we've seen NASCAR with Kyle Busch this year already be like, you can just do whatever. At Nashville, when he got wrecked, they're like, guys, he's had such bad luck, it's fine. Let him start second again. So I think at this
Right.
point, NASCAR officiating is kind of like just letting Kyle Busch do whatever at this point in the year after all the bad luck.
Right, but seeing the 99 of Suarez and the 3 of Dillon both run really well is very promising for these two teams, especially if you're a Ross Chastain fan, who's right now out of the cutoff by 3 points, which one of my bold predictions of the next 3 races is he wins to get in the playoffs. He doesn't point his way in the playoffs. He wins to get in the playoffs. Daytona, he's very good at super speedways. That's a good one. Michigan, it's a track like St. Louis he runs well at. We could see him win at St. Louis. But Ross Chastain I think is good especially after seeing the 99 run. I think Ross Chastain wins to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and this Trackhouse team is a really weird one to where we saw how good they were the first couple years of the next-gen car, just like how RCR had the uptick in performance. And I think they honestly have 2 good drivers. I think Daniel Suarez is at least a solid driver. I would say that Trackhouse level ride is probably what he's deserving of right now, because he's really had a bounce-back season. I know we say one of the worst 2 drivers in these 4 cars, but when 2 of them are Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain, someone's going to be third. I think for this level of car, Suarez has produced okay this year. Obviously, the win at Atlanta, but I would say kind of a Daniel Suarez, Carson Hocevar, the 2 that in my mind are kind of jockeying for that seat. I'd say Suarez has been absolutely fine, but Chastain, I don't really know what it is with him this year. It feels like it's a combination of those cars being slower and him being unlucky to where he's currently outside the cutoff line. Like, you look at him versus Bubba Wallace. If you ask me which of those drivers have been better this season, I say Chastain by a mile, yet Chastain's down 3 points. Right. So these things just kind of, they happen as they do, and with these last 3 races left, it's going to be really close between these guys. And Buescher as well. We talked about his early season form where it felt like there was a stretch of a month earlier in the year where he could have won 4 races in a row, and instead he's now sitting 18th.
Right, and I think if you're looking at Wallace, I feel like he's been more consistent. I don't think he's had the races where he's been as dominant as Drew Chastain or Buescher, but he's just been more consistent. He's kind of been like the mid-form of Chase Elliott this year, where Chase Elliott's ran top 5, top 10 all year. Wallace has run top 20, top 15 all year, and there's a few weeks where he runs top 5. I mean, Richmond was one of those races where he was up top 5, top 10 all race. So the consistency out of Wallace is really showing here because, Buescher, it's really difficult to imagine him being out of the cutoff line right now when he did come second and have wins stolen from him and just bad luck after bad luck after bad luck. He may have to win one of these races to get in. Barring a major failure from Joe Gibbs with Truex and Ty Gibbs not performing well, but Truex is in a pretty comfortable spot unless he has another issue. It really comes down to 2 spots. You have the Gibbs spot and the Wallace spot that hold it right now. So you have 4 guys fighting for 2 spots. Gibbs, Wallace, Chastain, and Buescher. It's hard to bet against Chastain and Buescher not making it, but with Gibbs being 18 plus, who knows?
Well, with 3 races left, I would say 18 is nothing. You lose 6 points per race, especially with stage points. That's not a comfortable cushion. And if I'm Ty Gibbs right now, I'm very concerned because Bubba Wallace is elite at Daytona. We've seen that over the years. He is incredible there. Chris Buescher almost won Darlington earlier this year. That's one of the races left. Ross Chastain, you already mentioned how good he is at these type of tracks. So if I'm Ty Gibbs, I am sweating quite a bit right now in that 15th spot. Because then if, let's say like a Kyle Busch or a Michael McDowell somehow wins Daytona as well, Ty Gibbs could be out of there in a heartbeat if he has a bad race. And something that's gone kind of under the radar is this summer, the Toyota reliability has not been good, especially for the Gibbs cars. Yeah. You saw Christopher Bell, a couple engine failures, Martin Truex engine failure. They've really hit Ty Gibbs hard. I think he's had 3 over the summer, 3 engine problems. So with that lingering over his head too, I would be very worried if I was the 54 right now going into these last 3 races.
Yeah, these last 3 is all going to be about pressure. And Ty Gibbs is a rookie. So who knows how he's going to
he's
take this pressure.
Driver.
Right, but this is the first year we've really seen him competitive.
Yeah.
So who knows how he's going to take this pressure. Wallace, he's weird. He either rises to pressure like he did last year around the first round of the playoffs, or he completely crumbles. It just depends on what mood he's in. But I will say, the post-race interview I saw with him made me feel like, okay, he's really, really a different person this time of the year than he was last year. And I think the pressure is not going to affect him as much because he's been here before. Like,
And
Ty Gibbs
Trackhouse
hasn't.
looks
The
good
Walls
right
hasn't.
now. Like
Right.
you've seen all year, Tyler Reddick is up on that regular season point standings, up near the top of that. But the last few weeks, you could argue that Bubba Wallace has been right with him, if not better, for the last 4 races. I wouldn't say better, but I could get an argument for that. Wallace has finally been putting in those equal performances with Tyler Reddick to where this team feels like a full unit now instead of just Tyler Reddick dragging it up the field. So I love that Bubba's on form now. I hope we see this out of him for a full year next year because I think that would shut a lot of his critics up to where if he's able to perform at the level he's been on for the last month, the whole season, I don't think there's anyone other than some people, we know what we mean by some people, asking him to be removed from that car.
Right. And before we move on to Michigan and our preview for next weekend, Chastain and Buescher, I think, in my opinion, have the best shot of winning a race in the next 3 races. Just with those cars and those drivers and the tracks we're going to. I know you mentioned Wallace at Daytona, but you could argue Chastain maybe better at Daytona than super speedways.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, Chastain and Buescher do have the best shot of winning a race out of all your Brink teams.
Yeah, guys I would look out for maybe a wild card Daytona win as far as guys outside of these 4 we've talked about. I would watch Michael McDowell at Daytona. I would watch Ricky Stenhouse at Daytona. We know how good he is at these super speedways. He runs up front there a lot. I would watch Kyle Busch at Daytona as well. He's going to be hungry. He's going to know that's probably his only chance once we get there. And then the final guy is Todd Gilliland. And you might say, why on earth would I watch Todd Gilliland? Well, if you remember Atlanta earlier this year, I know it's a slightly different super speedway, but he ran extremely well at Atlanta, controlled that race for a lot of it, and also ran up front for quite a bit at Talladega. So I think Todd Gilliland might make some noise as well. But I think those are your outside shots, although I do think it's probably going to come down to these main 4 here.
I agree. Unless Kyle Busch can somehow find some string of good luck at Daytona.
He's going to throw his scissors into the tires of the other cars.
Yeah, NASCAR is going to not even see it.
Yeah.
But let's move on to Michigan. I really like a Ford this weekend. I just feel like a Ford's going to win, and I know they typically run well there.
I'm looking at your pick, and that's not computing.
That's what I was getting to. But funny enough, I think a Toyota wins. Yeah, we've talked about 2311 and their dominance the past few weeks. We've talked about Tyler Reddick and how great he's been. You had him number 1 in your power rankings last week, or 2 weeks ago.
Ahead of Kyle Larson again. Finished third.
So I got Tyler Reddick winning. He's going to win another race this year, and Michigan's a track where he can probably show his skills. And Reddick, he's been building. He's going to get a win for the Plows.
Yeah, I think a Reddick win feels almost inevitable right now with how good he's been recently, and I do think he gets one in the next month for sure, but I'm actually taking his teammate to win this weekend at Michigan, and that might seem a little weird, but Bubba Wallace is very, very good at Michigan. It is a track that is top 5 in his career average finish. It's one of the tracks he has a top 5 at. I think he only has a top 5 at 6 or 7 tracks, and this is one of them. He runs very, very well here. He even ran well here when he was driving the 43. So this is happy hunting grounds for him. I would say that considering the cars they've been in their careers, I'm more impressed with Wallace's resume at Michigan than I am Tyler Reddick's. He has been absolutely incredible here. I think he likes this track a lot, and I think he wins this weekend. You're talking about him knowing the pressure is on. What better way to take the pressure off than coming to a track you love and sticking that car up front and winning the race? So I think you see a Bubba Wallace victory this weekend to make that cut line even more interesting.
Yeah, the Bubba Wallace win would be fun, especially for me, because he's from Mobile, Alabama, which is, I'm across the bay, so he's pretty much our hometown driver. So it's always, interesting when he wins down here. You get a lot more people kind of come out of the woods, so you're like, I didn't even know you watched the sport.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we said, 2311, I feel like they didn't really make the changes in the Olympics breaks, but I think they made some changes kind of around the end of June or something, and these cars really turned on, and you really noticed it when Wallace started running better, because Reddick, he's an incredible talent, but when Wallace really starts competing, you're like, okay, Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan did something that worked.
Well, I think
So,
they've
I mean,
figured out something too, just setup wise for Wallace, because I think the pace in these cars has been there for most of the year. I don't know what they changed on there to make Wallace happier, but if you watch him race the last, I would say, month and a half, it looks like he's fighting this car less off the corner. Usually every week you would see him wrestling this car. He seems to just have a smoother driving style now with this car, and he runs better when he's able to drive smooth. He's not a guy that likes to fight his car around a track. He's not a guy that makes pace that way. So whatever setup change they found that's making the car work that way, I think is going to benefit him loads. I think it's worked really well already, and you're going to continue to see that.
and that could just be 2311 still a fairly new team. So maybe they're like, oh, Reddick's performing better. He's our better driver. So we're just going to give you Reddick's setup and have at it. And Bubba's like, I'm not Tyler Reddick. I don't drive like Tyler Reddick. So
Yeah.
maybe finally they've kind of adjusted to Bubba Wallace's driving. And
Which
they're
that's what
very
good
different
teams
setups.
do. You make
Right,
two
but
setups for different drivers. You're able to see who runs better with what. Like Joe Gibbs back in the day, the 2013 juggernaut Joe Gibbs was not giving Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch the same setup every week because one of them ran
no.
fast. That's not how you run a successful team.
Right, and they're still working out some kinks. I know they have that brand new facility that they're getting breaking ground or not breaking, just ready at this point. So exciting stuff to come from the 2311 and 2311 fans. But let's move over to MLB real quick. We have kind of a fun little debate, which I don't know your side. Ask your side on this beforehand, but I feel like we're going to agree, so it's not going to be much of a debate. But will Aaron Judge hit 60 home runs?
I think he hits 95. No, I think it's close. I think he makes it.
Really?
I think he makes it.
I was expecting you to say no, because I'm on the side of no. He's at 42 right now. So as of August 12th, he's at 42. So he has about a month and just over a month and a half, we'll say, to accomplish this. And I'm saying no. I don't think he gets it. 42, that's 18 he's got to hit in the next month and a half. He's been great. He's an MVP candidate. He's not hitting 60 home runs. But why do you think he's hitting 60 home runs?
Because the last couple of months, or you saw what he did in May. May, Aaron Judge was absolutely incredible, and I think he's kind of, you've seen the Yankees struggle a little bit. I think he's been part of it, to where he's still been good, but he's not been like Aaron Judge good. And be honest, do you think the MLB is above giving Aaron Judge juice balls to see him hit 60? I think no. And I think that, I want to say the Yankees have a bunch of home games coming up. Hold on, let me.
Okay, while you're looking that up, in the last 7 games, he has hit 1 home run in his last 7. So for me,
Exactly, he's due.
he's due, but is he due for 18 in a month and a half? I don't think so. I think if you look at his last 7, and that number was 8, anywhere from 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 or 5 to 9, then you could have more of an argument. That puts him at around 40, we'll say like 46, 47 right now. That's a definite, yeah, he's probably going to do it but I just, one in your last 7's not getting it done.
So
not in
this
crunch
is my
time.
counterpoint to that. Those games, 3 were in Toronto, and 3 of them were in Toronto, and 4 of them were at the Angel Stadium. Those are 2 pitchers' parks, and he comes back, and you look at him now. Or sorry, those were away. So you look at now what he's doing, and they get the White Sox. He'll hit it like a million versus the White Sox.
Is it in Chicago? Because that ball's flying right now in Chicago.
Yeah, it's in Chicago. Then they get 3 at Detroit, which harder park to hit the ball out of. But then they get 3 at home versus Cleveland, which tough pitching, but it's at home. They get a home series versus the Rockies. Then they get a series at the Nationals. Then they get the Cardinals at home, and the Cardinals pitching has been rough recently. They play at Texas. Ball doesn't like to fly there. They play at Wrigley. Ball doesn't like to fly there a ton. But then they get the Royals at home. I think he'll rake there. They get the Red Sox at home. Late season versus the Red Sox is one where it's either boom or bust, in my opinion. And that is a 4-game series. I think he hits at least 2 that series personally. At Seattle and at Oakland, the ball doesn't like to fly there, but he also murders the A's. Low leverage Judge versus the A's, he's going to be raking. Then they get the Orioles at home, and then they finish with the Pirates at home. So while it's not an incredibly favorable matchup in some of those, I think a lot of the home games versus some of the teams they play on the road, I think that's enough for him to get it done. Because let's say he hits 2 versus the Rockies, 2 versus the Nationals, 2 versus the Cardinals, which I think is all very possible. That's 6 of your 18 already. So that's a third and less than a third of your remaining games. So I think he definitely has a shot. I just want to be more fun and say that he gets there. It's definitely unlikely, but I think he does it.
All right, so I'm going to use this to segue into our next segment where we look at divisions. Right now, the Yankees and Orioles are tied. Exact same record in the AL East. Both 70 and 49. If he hits 60 home runs, there's your storyline. Aaron Judge carries the Yankees to the division win. I think if he hits 60 home runs, they win the division. Because if he's hitting 60 home runs, right. But hitting's contagious. If he goes on a run and all the attention's on the Yankees right now, is Aaron Judge going to do it? Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Then you have guys like Juan Soto and Jazz now. There's a chance that if he's hitting, those guys are going to hit, and they win the division. If he doesn't hit 60 home runs, which I don't think is going to happen, I think the Orioles win the division.
I would argue that even if he does, you're talking about hitting being contagious. What's more contagious than the on-fire Jackson Holiday right now for the Baltimore Orioles? He has been on fire. The Orioles are really playing well as a result. This Orioles team is playing great baseball right now, even though they're only 5-5 in their last 10, whatever. I think they're playing really well right now, and you see that continue through the rest of the season. The good thing for the Orioles is when they slumped, the Yankees also slumped. So these teams slumped at the exact same time pretty much. I like the overall team of the Orioles better. I think even if Judge gets to 60, it's not enough.
I agree. I think the Orioles, I love young baseball teams, especially when you get close to the playoffs, because they just feel like they feed off the energy more, and they're more like built on vibes, and they're like, oh, this is the first time that we're going to make the playoffs for a lot of us, or the first time we're on a really good team. And so I just feel like that's going to carry them. The youth is going to carry them to the playoffs for the Yankees. And I just love young, exciting teams. So I do think the Orioles still win this division. But, yeah, who knows? I am very excited to see if Judge can hit 60 or not, because I know the media is trying to prop that up right now, but I think they're overhyping it a little bit. I don't think that happens. I think, all right, if I had to put a number on it, I'm going 54 home runs. 54 home runs is my number.
I think he hits 60 exactly. I don't think he has enough time to get a ton more. I think he hits 60 exactly.
All right, well, this will be fun to see who's more right towards the end of the season. But, yeah, we just talked about the AL East. We'll just go to wild card, because that's the most interesting thing right now in really both divisions. So you have Orioles, Yankees. One of those teams is going to be one of your wild card teams. The Guardians have a firm hold over the Central right now. However, they are starting to falter a little bit. 3-7
it's not
a
super firm hold. The Twins and the Royals are both kind of right there.
And I feel like they're playing better baseball right now, especially the Twins. I think the Twins are playing better baseball right now. So who knows with that division, because they're 3.5, 4 games out. Oh, I don't know why I said firm hold. But I just still think that you have 2 wild card teams from the Central. I think you're gonna get 1 from the East, 2 from the Central, and then
the West isn't getting 1.
Still just you don't think they're gonna get 1?
No, whichever team loses that Astros-Mariners division race is getting heartbroken. I don't think either of those teams have the staying power to stay with the Royals or the Twins the rest of the way.
So you're saying 1 from the East, 2 from the Central. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I see that as well. Who do you think wins the West, Astros or Mariners?
Man, I think because they're both kind of hot right now. Astros 7-3 in their last 10, Mariners 6-4. I love the Mariners starting pitching. I have all year. I think the Mariners' current pitching is more sustainable than the Astros' on-fire hitting right now, and the Mariners' hitting has started to get at least a heartbeat of some sort since acquiring Randy Arozarena. This team is not quite dead at the plate anymore, so I'm taking the Mariners. I took the Mariners at the start of the year. I'm going to stay with the Mariners.
I'm with you. The Mariners has been a streaky team all year as far as like offense and defensive production. Like, their defense has been pretty good all year, but they did have a few streaks of not very good.
Turned one of the best double plays this season a couple days ago. Did you see that?
I did see that. That was incredible. But their offense has been extremely streaky this season. They're really good, and then they're like one of the worst in baseball. Then they're pretty good, and one of the worst in baseball. They've had more low streaks than high streaks, but maybe you see a high streak come, and there's only a month and a half left. If they get hot at the right time, same thing the Diamondbacks did at the end of the year last year, and they rode that wing. So I think the Mariners get hot and make the playoffs. So I'm with you. I'm 2 from the Central, and then probably the Red Sox not the Red Sox, the Yankees or Orioles from the American League East. But the National League East, National League is when it gets a lot
dicey. A lot messy.
Very, very messy. I think last time we did a division check-in, the Braves were very comfortable in the wild card, and
Not
now
anymore.
I don't think they make the playoffs. Hot take.
I don't
know if it's
either.
I don't know if it's a hot take, but I don't think they make the playoffs, especially with teams kind of coming to form in the National League Central. I mean, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Cubs are one game behind 500 now.
The Reds.
The Reds are not making the playoffs.
No, they're not.
The Diamondbacks kind of doing the same thing they did last year, get hot at the right time.
The Diamondbacks are on fire.
September.
Dude, Eugenio Suarez might have had the best month of his life in
Padres
July.
are hitting the baseball right now, like the Padres should. It's like they're all Tony Gwynn right now. I think you get 2 from the West, 1 from the Central in the wild card.
Are you saying Cubs or Cardinals?
Cardinals.
I know it. I know it hurts, but I had to hear you say it.
it.
Listen, the Reds beat the Cardinals 6-1 today. The Reds are not making the playoffs, but
Yeah, quit.
yeah,
I think don't manifest it happening.
I think you get 2 from the West and 1 from the East, and I think your 1 from the East is the New York Mets.
I like that. I like the Mets. If the East gets one, it will be the Mets. I agree with that.
I like the Braves pitching a lot. Braves pitching has been great, but you got to have a bat. I know they're going to be getting Ozzy Albies back at some point before the year ends, but this Braves lineup right now just looks asleep. They blew a game horrifically to the Rockies where they were winning, I think 8-1 or 8-0 and lost 9-8. So just a horrific series for the Braves recently, and it's like Matt Olson's dead this year. You're not getting anything out of Matt Olson. Sean Murphy's been awful since coming back from the oblique. And Austin Riley, and left for a little bit on paternity leave, still has not been great, even when he's in the lineup. So even your guys that you expected to be good, to put it perfectly honest, the best hitter on this team this year has been Jared Kelenic out of the leadoff spot. The Braves have no semblance of offense right now. It's been awful.
I mean, their run differential is plus 34, and on this lineup, we've seen it be way better than that in the past. In recent
Reds'
years.
run differential is plus 45. Do we get a playoff spot?
You know what the Cubs' run differential was last year? It was like plus 80, all right? So we didn't make the playoffs, so I don't want to hear it, okay? I'm still feeling that pain. Say to Nicky ducked a fly ball and broke every heart in Chicago.
Then there was the Mariners with their fun differential, like negative 70 in a playoff spot.
Yeah. But so the Phillies, Brewers, we can assume are going to win the division. The Dodgers, you can question now. Do the Diamondbacks push for the division?
I think the Padres win this division.
Okay, I actually like that better than the Diamondbacks winning this division.
Yeah, I think that especially with this Padres rotation right now, Dylan Cease is on form right now. Joe Musgrove, great pitcher. Yu Darvish, great pitcher. Even Michael King has been really good this year. I think if this Padres rotation can continue to buckle down, if the lineup stays like this, what team, like the Dodgers don't have the arms to hang with the Padres at all, even with the lineup. And the Padres and Diamondbacks both 8-2 in their last 10. Padres are looking incredible right now. I think San Diego wins this division. And I think that if the Dodgers lineup cannot just return to absolute peak mode right now, they might even lose second to the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, the Giants are playing better baseball in the last few months too. I mean, the Giants can make a push for the playoffs. I mean,
listen,
if you're looking at it.
It took everything in me to not say 3 NL West teams for this wild card because I like the Giants a lot as well. Blake Snell is back in a big way, and Logan Webb is his normal self, being great out there. This team has looked a lot better since shipping off Jorge Soler. I don't know if just they didn't like that vibe or whatever, but then there was, what was it? Tyler Fitzgerald. Tyler Fitzgerald hitting like nukes every day for the Giants out of nowhere. Giants were a fun vibes team for a little bit. I don't know if that'll last or not. If it does, great. I mean, who would have predicted 4 NL West teams in the playoffs at the start of this year?
Yeah, certainly not me, but I'm with you. The Padres, I think, are going to win the division if the Dodgers keep playing the way they're playing right now, and the Padres keep playing the way they're playing right now. I think it depends on one of the Padres and the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers have enough of a lead that if the Diamondbacks or Padres don't stay as high, the Dodgers can barely coast into the playoffs.
It's only 3.5 games. It's not a lot.
But we've seen stints with the Padres and Diamondbacks where they just don't show up. And so that's why I'm saying if the Padres, if they do 60% of what they're doing now, I think they win the division. But if they falter at all, I don't know. And the Diamondbacks, same thing. The Diamondbacks feel like one of the streakiest teams in baseball.
Yeah, they are.
And it's just how long is this gonna stand? And I don't see the Diamondbacks having the stamina in this hot streak to win the division. I think they make the wild card comfortably, but I don't think they have enough to win the division to beat the Padres or Dodgers. I think this race comes down to the Padres and Dodgers, with the Diamondbacks having a comfortable wild card spot. And then as far as the East goes, the Braves and Mets, I do think the Mets just take over the Braves at some point and don't ever look back. I think they just wave bye-bye to the Braves.
As weird as it is to say, the Mets are a more complete team right now, though that might sound absurd. That's really what it's been. And we're both talking about the Padres. You look at their remaining schedule here. They have a 3-game series versus the Pirates that starts today at home. You'd expect them to take at least 2 of those. Then they go on the road at Colorado, who for some reason has kind of owned them, so I don't know what will happen with that, but you would hope that they could take care of Colorado. They get the Twins at home, not an easy series. Twins are hot right now. You'd hope they can perform there. They get the Mets at home. Then they travel to St. Louis. They play at the Cardinals. Then they have a 3-game set versus the Rays to start September. They get the Tigers, and then it's a lot of division games for the rest there. They have Giants, 2 versus the Mariners, Giants again, 3 versus the Astros. But then their big help is here. They get a 3-game set versus the White Sox in their third to last series of the year. So you would hope to God that's a sweep if you're a Padres fan. And then you look at the end of their schedule. This is going to be an absolutely crazy end to the year for them. They get 3 versus the Dodgers and 3 versus the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting very exciting in the National League, more so than the American League, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be a crazy, hectic race, especially for the West and for the wild card, like it was last season. I mean, the wild card was incredibly decisive last year, and I think you're going to see that again. But yeah, at this point, all there is to do is watch and hope if you're one of those fans. So that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we'll start getting into some college football. That's very, very, very exciting. It's crazy. It's that time of year again. And we'll be back in studio next week. So back in a college town, talking about college sports. Nothing I can say except excitement.
Yes.
All right.
All right.